So I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can actually use the food guide and use it for your group coaching programs or a group coaching class, a one-time thing, a month-long program, a 3-month program, or whatever. You can use it for whatever time frame you feel comfortable using the guide for, but for just the sake of focusing in on one approach, I am going to just kind of walk through how this can be used in, say, a 4-week course on how to help someone move away from the standard American diet into a life of whole food living and making changes to their lifestyle. So I'm going to keep the guide as it is, but that doesn't mean you have to leave the title or the content that way. I'm just kind of going to give you an example of how you might break this up to create a 4-week program that you can make money on. So the group coaching outline that I have created gives all of the tips about how to do this, where to do it, times, what to ask for as far as like just some examples for money and so on. So what I would do, for example, is I would have people meet me at a meetup spot. Maybe it's a conference room, a library. Maybe you can give it access to a doctor's office that has a room for you to do a meeting in. Or maybe you're doing it online on Zoom where you're sharing your screen and everyone can kind of see what you're doing. Now, if you're doing this locally, you're going to have a way that you can actually share the screen or share the information, whether it be on a projector, whether it be that everyone gets a handout of the pieces of this guide in a dripped content kind of way where they get chapters 1, 2, 3 or whatever at a time, so they're not getting everything all at once. However you choose to do that is going to be up to you and your style of coaching. Now, it would be really great if we could just say, here you go, here's a template, this is exactly how you coach, and there you go, ask for this amount of money, and you've got a stream of income. But I don't think that that is actually the best way to coach. I think that that's too much of a canned approach. We're already using something someone else created, which is great. But we need to be able to customize our approach about how we coach with who we are, what we believe, what our feelings are, use our own inflections, and things like that. So I encourage you to make this your own, however that looks for you. And just remember that this is a guide. This is not a step-by-step, do it this way kind of thing. All right, with that said, I'm just going to be scrolling through here and kind of showing you what we would do. So the first, let's just say you meet on Saturday afternoons from 12 to 1:30. Your first class might be an hour and a half long, where you're just really educating, walking through the process as an educator and a teacher. And so we're going to first talk about gluten. You don't read everything piece by piece because these people are going to get a copy of this guide by email and they can read. So we're not trying to do that. But what we are trying to do is to engage them in the conversation. Ask them questions. Like at the very beginning, you might even say something like, does everybody understand what gluten is and why it's so toxic to our bodies? And then you get some input where someone might say, oh, I've tried a gluten-free diet before. I didn't know why I was doing it, but I have tried it. Other people might say, I have no idea what it is. And then you would roll into the process of explaining it by using this guide. You would say, okay, so let's talk about what gluten really is so that you are fully educated on what could be happening to your body as a product of eating gluten. So this guide is one of the drafts. So you've got the right guide in your hands. If you have purchased the guide or it's come with your programs, it's got the right images and so on. You want to make sure to make that comment about traditional grains here. I like to put that disclaimer in because people always want to argue about the fact that, back when in the day people used to eat grains with no problems and so on. So make sure that you talk a little bit about what that looks like to prepare grains traditionally, meaning, soaking and sprouting and things like that. You could take 15 to 20 minutes just talking about this part of this guide, discussing about how our ancestors knew how to eat back in the day. Our food was not touched by glyphosate and GMOs and, things like that. Do a couple of touches on what Dr. Auer says about byproducts being sold to mass feeding lots for animal feeds, what the animal eats, we eat. You're going to take bits and pieces out of this, and you're going to use it as your own. And then you're going to remind them, I'm providing you with so much good information about how to learn more about gluten and what it does to the body. It's a great point to let them know that, gluten is not just a digestive disorder. You don't just have stomach problems from eating gluten. So many other problems can result from it. So making sure that they're very aware of that you are providing them with resources. There's absolutely no way you could spend weeks learning about gluten with all the information out there. So and then let them know, listen, if you're really dead set about sticking with gluten in your food plan in your daily life, the Funky Kitchen is a great resource for learning how to actually do it the right way. Then you can launch even further into what kind of problems gluten can actually cause. And this is where you take it a little bit further. Do a little bit of that, not so convincing people. You don't want to convince them. You want to educate them to make their own decision. But really touch on these topics that the gluten intolerance is different than an allergy. It's a reaction, and it can affect the body in a myriad of ways, okay? And so your gluten intolerance resources also, you want to point those out here, and they can take a peek at what all comes with actually being gluten intolerant. I always like to focus a little bit on how can I eat just a little gluten and be okay? Well, no, not really. There's really no 80-20 rule with gluten. You either are or you aren't if you are a person that cannot tolerate it. So, encouraging them to look into ways that they can still enjoy their favorite foods like pizza. We've given them a recipe here, letting them know it doesn't mean that you have to give up all the things that you love. And then, of course, going into the big one, the one that everybody seems to know more about than anything else, which is celiac disease. Now, this isn't something I would spend a whole lot of time on, but I would definitely focus on this being the one area where most people seem to think is what people have problems with gluten from. It shows up in celiac. But again, it's not necessarily just digestive. So many other things come with the problem of eating gluten. So there's, of course, your celiac resources. And then since we've already touched on talking about autoimmunity is one of those things that, I don't know the percentage of people walking around with an autoimmune disorder or disease, but I can tell you that many, many more people have one than realize that they do. I mean, we can have an autoimmune disease brewing under the surface for years, and it may take something like eating gluten or eating soy or an environmental toxin or something we put on our skin that actually triggers and sets off that expression of that autoimmune disease. So talking about this is important. It's important for many reasons, not only because eating gluten and eating a standard American diet can precede autoimmunity, but leaky gut actually precedes autoimmunity for sure. So how gluten affects leaky gut and so on is further down in the guide, but really great resources here on autoimmunity as well. And then, of course, you have the people that are like, well, I'm just not sold on it. I just don't think it's necessary to give it up. And some of those people are probably people with high inflammatory markers in their body. Maybe they're overweight, haven't been able to lose that last 10 or 15 pounds after they've had a baby, whatever it may be. But there's so many other things that people can benefit from by getting rid of it. So as you can see, there's some extensive information in here that can take up, some really good time in a group class. So resources for understanding leaky gut, gluten addiction, and cross-reactivity. This is a really great little section here as well, because just giving up gluten isn't always enough for people. In fact, you may have people that are in your classes that think that they eat perfect and everything's great, but they are still having problems and they have no idea what cross-reactivity really is. So excellent resource on cross-reactivity. Nice little plug here on Dr. Oz, because you're going to be dealing with some people who are really bought into conventional care. So just to know that Dr. Oz is bringing attention to this can be really helpful to help people want to take things further with learning. And so here we are telling them, you shouldn't eat gluten and, these are the things that it causes, but let's talk about the things that they can have. We want to jump right into the things that they can have so that we aren't putting that big doomsday gray cloud over their head that they cannot have this and they cannot have that. So let's talk about the things that they can have. You say that we avoid inflammatory foods and colors and dyes, but eat food in its whole form. Eat nutrient-dense foods. Eat humanely raised grass-fed proteins and organic vegetables. Really, it looks like, a lot more things that they can have when you spread it out like that. So then we also tell them these are the two, and remember the word diet isn't something that we talk about. We don't use words like I'm going to help you with your diet. I'm going to tell you what to eat on your diet. The paleo diet and the perfect health diet, those are terms that work together. So we are just sharing information that someone else has already put out there into the world about the paleo diet and the perfect health diet. So I like to talk a little bit about the misconceptions of the paleo diet, because people seem to think that it's nothing but meat, and really that's not true. It is a high vegetable approach with low toxins and added hormones and fillers, moderate meat, moderate fat, and it's really we need to make sure that people understand that this is not, you're not going to be eating a ketogenic diet on the paleo diet. There's another diet called the ketogenic diet, but that's not what we're talking about here. So more resources on the paleo diet here, with kid-friendly information and lots of recipes and ideas for people to take it further. Then the perfect health diet, which isn't talked about as much as I think it should be in our circle of health coaches and wellness pioneers, is one of those plans that it allows for a little bit more wiggle room. So when you're looking at the perfect health diet, you're going to be looking at a pyramid of things that gives you an idea of what is good as far as amounts are concerned when it comes to those things that some people just take out completely, like dairy, starches, and alcohol. It's a little bit more lenient. A lot of people like to start there with their clients. So, of course, there's your link for more information on the perfect health diet. There's your testimonials for this style of eating. So as I always mention when I'm walking through these guides, you're going to have, however you open it, it may be formatted differently. You may have to delete a blank page or whatever. It just depends on your programming. So, and again, this is a draft. So none of the images are in here. This is completely editable. You can take out anything that I have in here and replace it with the things that you want to talk about. All right, so there's no doubt there are other forms of eating whole foods. And the reason why I have this focused around the paleo diet, the perfect health diet, is because I have found the most success with people in almost 7 years of coaching. Really haven't run into anybody that's really interested in a vegan diet or a keto diet. They're more interested in being able to do something that they can sustain for life and share with their families, so that they're not eating, or cooking 2 different kinds of food, and they're on something that feels like it makes sense for their lifestyle. So carbohydrates are one of those things that, a lot of people think that they're the devil and no one should eat them. So I like for people to get educated on carbohydrates. So here's the thing. We are almost, I think we're a little bit close to halfway through the guide, and we've done an hour and a half on it. So when it comes to, the time that you're spreading this thing out, you have wiggle room. So if you want to go, an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours, you can, of course. But try not to pack so much information in there that they get completely overwhelmed. So maybe we stop right there. Let me scroll back as an example on page 25. And then we tell them next time we meet, we're going to be talking about carbohydrates. So then you start back up here on that Saturday. First, you spend a few minutes at the beginning talking about the gluten, talking about the diets. And then you go into carbohydrates and you start here with some education about what it is, where they get their carbohydrates, safe carbohydrate resources. This is an important piece to spend some time on, in my opinion, because people automatically think bread, crackers, and cookies are okay if you talk about carbohydrates. So I call it safe carbohydrate resources. So talk about the difference, talk about when they're appropriate, when they're not. Talk about starches and the poor vilified white potato, and why it actually can be good for you, and why sweet potatoes are so great for you as well. So, those are things that I think you need to spend some time really going over in detail as far as like covering what a safe carbohydrate really is. Now, we go into chapter 4, and this is the area where, remember, we're still on day 2 here. And we need to talk about something other than just food. Yes, it's a food guide, but if we're doing a 4-week plan, we want to have other things in there that are helping to move them from a standard American diet into a whole food lifestyle. And that also means the lifestyle part means that we have to address other things besides food. So this is a great area to talk to them about, listen, we've talked a lot about, we've spent, a good couple of hours on food, the paleo diet, the perfect health diet, or whatever. Remember, again, whatever speaks to you, you're going to have to add that content in here if that's what you choose to do to change it. And that's completely fine. This is your program. These are just the guts of it. This is a whole food education food guide, and talks about the GMOs and the gluten and all that for a reason. So if we're practicing that functional health coaching approach, and we're using this food guide to lead us into helping our clients find success through a 4-week program, then we need to touch on how do they do this? How do we go about doing this? The education part, We've already spent a great deal of time on it, which is fabulous. But we also want to make sure that they understand that, there's a lot more to it. So let's talk about how we would get there and how we might reassure them that we're not asking them to give everything up right now. It's time to dump everything in your pantry. We're not doing that. At least that's not what I think we should be doing. So I let them know, listen, we're going to talk about, the first month of your movement into safe and whole food eating and a better lifestyle. You're going to spend a month on just getting educated. Now, let me back up for a second here and let you know this is also something you can use for a 3-month program where you can really stretch out your coaching groups in 3 months. And I'm doing templates for that as well. I'm doing this along the lines of education, preparation, and action for groups. It is a very time-consuming program to put together, so I don't have a timeline on it. But when you're talking to your people, you can change this from month 1 to week 1 if they want to fast forward this, however you want to change it. But the very first step for someone to be successful is to get them educated, which is what we've been doing with the front of this food guide. And then we also want to let them know it's really not about the willpower. The big part that hormones play in this process, the stress that we're under, the things that, the dopamine receptors, the neurotransmitters, all of those things play a part in how we are able to make change in our life. So we want to talk to them about that. We want to reassure them. We've got a lot more resources here on what leaky gut is. So we're going to spend a little bit more time sharing educational resources that are more auditory and visual and not just so much reading, because a lot of people don't do as well on just the reading part. And then we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about things like soy. You can touch on that. Again, this is still more education, but we're reminding them this is part of the change process, right? So once they feel like they've got enough education to understand why they're making the changes they are, then we talk to them. Maybe this becomes our 3rd week meeting, or however you've structured this, but for the sake of, again, staying focused on sort of a plan, maybe I would wrap up back here and say, okay, so we've talked about the education part. I've given you a lot of great resources in the guide. I want to give you an action step. You might leave them with an action step for the next visit, which maybe they go and they watch one of these videos you pick, or they read an article that you choose, or something like that. Just something an action step that you choose to give to them. And then you let them know, and next time we meet, which is your 3rd visit for that month, for those 4-week sessions, I'm going to teach you how to get prepared for the actual change that you're going to go through. Again, you can turn this into a 3-month process. Month 1, you do nothing but get educated with them. Again, I would only meet probably once a month or twice a month in that situation. For month 2, you're preparing them. You're telling them, everyone has a different style for getting ready for change. Some people want to do everything online. Some people like me, I like to have my hands on things. And one of the things that's been really successful for my clients is to create a recipe binder, and then also an informational binder to read when they feel like they have time or they can get to it and it's not stressful for them. So just as a reminder, you can change out these links, you can take out these bullets, you can add in your own, whatever it looks like, but you want to talk to them about how important getting ready for something is. And that means creating shopping lists. That means that they can, and I will be plugging the meal genius into this guide as well when I get the link. It just means that you are going to support whatever choices they make to get prepared for the changes that they need. But one of the things I think is really helpful is to give them tips about the recipes. Like when going gluten-free or taking things out of their normal food plan, I like to provide tips on how to make it less painful for them. So I recently got the Instant Pot end of last year. I would put the Instant Pot in here when I do the revision on this guide about how fast that can make creating food for your family and how easy it can make things. I like to tell them about making their own cookbook. I like to provide a list to restock the pantry, things like that. Just, some actionable steps that they can take, and then tips. And, just some reassurance, like don't try to be perfect at this. When we first get started with things, with changes, things happen. So really be gentle to yourself, share with your family what you're trying to do, involve the kids on the grocery store trip, and so on. So just some really nice actionable steps for them to do at home so that they don't feel so overwhelmed. So again, I like to reassure people, if you fall off the wagon of change, be mindful of it. Notice why it happened. Don't judge yourself and just get back on and move forward. I don't like people to have to live in that space of judging themselves. So some homework right here might be, before we meet again, or maybe this is maybe you're still in the third week, you can talk to them about this homework here. Towards the end of a relationship, you have the option to take the guide all the way to the end with the last class, or leave the last class with a little bit of information from the guide and then leave the rest open for questions. So homework. So the one thing I like for people to do, and I've always had great success with, is for having people to start cleaning their, learning how to read labels and cleaning out their house, their pantry at home before they really, really go for the big dump, which that sounds kind of crazy, but that's what they end up doing eventually. But you can start with the pantry, and I like the safe and unsafe piles. That's what I like for people to create. So you have a safe and unsafe pile. You clean out the pantry, pull it all out, and put it into those sections according to the guides and the list that you provide to them. And they're in this guide as well. Get the Balanced Bites guides out. Tells you what the sugars are, what ingredients are safe and unsafe. Then after they're done looking at that, they can see how big that unsafe pile is, how small the safe pile is. Then they can put everything back in. Right? We're giving them permission. Just put it all back into the pantry. And eventually, they're going to take it all out eventually. But this is a learning experience and a homework step for them to see exactly, put their eyes on what they're really doing in their pantry. But then without the panic of having to dump it all at the same time. Same thing. It's really providing them a safe place to learn, not panic, not feel stressed, put it all back, and then we're going to do it again later. Eating out's a big one, a really big one. So this is the area where most people are like, I can't eat anything. And then they get tired of cooking, so they're overwhelmed. And then a lot of times they fall off the wagon right here of change because they don't have the tips on how to do this. So lots of resources on how to eat out safely. So maybe you wrap up right there and you say, next week when we meet, we're going to finish up with the food guide and we're going to talk about the action steps on month 3. And we're going to have some time for Q&A. Okay, so you're going to have to edit this guide to whatever time frame you want. I know I keep repeating that, but I want to remind you, maybe this is the 3rd month that you're working with them. Maybe this is, I don't know, the 4th week, whatever. But you have to edit this according to whatever time you choose to do your groups in. So, you tell them how important, the first 2 steps are. Reiterate that education and preparation are hugely important for walking through the steps of getting to a sustainable change, which is what you're trying to do. And then comes the action step. Action takes courage and commitment. And sometimes they fall off the wagon of change there too. And if it happens, it's okay. It's okay. No judgment of yourself. You tell your clients, don't worry about it. You'll get back to it. It's not permission to keep going off the wagon. Like sometimes we have clients who say, well, I ate 3 cookies, so I decided to eat the whole thing. No, if you ate the 3 cookies and you felt bad about it, then you say to yourself, well, it was just 3 cookies. I'm going to put them away and I'm going to think about it and just be more mindful next time. So then we talk about the actual action step. The action part of it is the purge, where it's time to clean out the pantry and the refrigerator for good. They've already done the homework where they get to learn about it, what's in there, how bad things are. Then we're going to teach them how to do this in a bigger way and in a more permanent way. So here's some great tips for how to do that. While you're cleaning it out, make your list to shop. Let them keep 2 gluten-containing products in the pantry if that makes them feel better. Eventually, those things are going to go away. Maybe they keep them in there for another week or 2 and they replace it. So, that's just the way that we're trying to help them to navigate slowly into a functional lifestyle where they're changing and they're not stressing their body out. They're having some fun with it. It's starting to make sense why this change needs to take place. So here's some tips for changing habits. Reminders and more information, of course. Tell them about how, it takes time and patience. If something stresses them out, back away from it. Change it up. Take care of yourself. There's some great resources for dressings and things like that. And then again, as we remind them, it's not just about food. It's about what comes with that. And this is the part where you can kind of go through it, because it will be up to you on whether or not you want to lead into, this is an opportunity to do another group class that's ready for them to sign up for. So you can talk to them about stress relief in brief and let them know, listen, I'm starting a class on stress relief. It starts in 2 weeks. If you're interested in taking all of these topics further and learning more about how I can help you to look at stress differently, you can sign up. Or you can just keep this going the way it is, and on your last day together, talk about all of these pieces and let them know, like, you can be eating as great as you possibly can and change all of that, but if you're not, seeing your stress in a different way, if you're not sleeping, if you're not having more fun in your life, if you are not moving your body, that kind of thing, then it's all for naught. Okay, there's a few resources in the back here, but nothing really necessary, because all of your resources take you where you want to be. So that is just a general, really, really loose example of how I might use the guide to create an editable group coaching program. I might even copy and paste. Like, you might even take out this whole last section I got the, not this necessarily, but take out these pieces right here and create a whole group around them. And so you would end your class by saying, all right, you guys have the food part down. So what would come next? And this is where you lead into your group coaching programs that either you do one on sleep, you do one on fun, you do one on movement, you do one on perceiving stress. You've got like 4 more groups you can follow up with and make more money in. So people would sign up and just say, if you want to go ahead and join me, I'm giving 10% off to everyone who took this class, or whatever that looks like for you. So I'm hoping that this was helpful to just kind of break down how the food guide can be used to create a program today. You can sit down with it and make it your own and start doing advertising, marketing, get out there and tell people, listen, I have a plan and I want to walk you through it, and let's get together every Saturday, or let's get together every month. We're going to get together twice and walk them through this in a 3-month way. Very doable, very doable. So I'm hoping that was helpful. And again, look for the group templates and the outlines and some names and topics that I have created. Those will be up soon.